We got the HMS Victory series. This is going to go in between the Napoleon series to kind of connect things. You ask, you will receive. Quick announcement before we jump into it, though. We do have a Discord server now, so you can join. You can, conversate with other people within the Discord server, talk to me, as well as, ask and suggest new videos. And hey, that's what it's all about, community. So, guys, are you ready? I'm ready. Let's jump into it, shall we? HMS Victory, Part 1 of 2.
1805. Britain is at war with France. The French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte will soon dominate mainland Europe. But at sea, Britain's Royal Navy reigns supreme.
Which has been that way forever.
That year, Napoleon wins one of his greatest victories against the Russians and Austrians.
And we're going to pause real quick. We'll pause real quick. Sorry, guys. I got to say this. I understand this video is more or less like a tangent of the Napoleonic Wars and the coalitions. So there's going to be things that we haven't reacted to that's going to be mentioned here. Now, I kind of have like an idea of where Napoleon goes after Italy anyway. So it's not like it's totally a spoiler alert here. But more or less, this is to kind of like wrap everything together, if that makes sense. So let's keep going.
At Austerlitz. But 6 weeks earlier, off the coast of Spain, the British win a battle of much more lasting strategic significance. Off Cape Trafalgar, the Royal Navy inflicts a crushing defeat on the combined fleet of France and Spain. Enemy losses are devastating. British naval superiority will not be seriously challenged again for the rest of the war. Britain goes on to play a leading role in Napoleon's eventual defeat. Its greatest contribution? Its wooden walls. The Royal Navy. Britain is the world's largest naval power, with 136 ships of the line and 110,000 men at sea.
Wow.
The Navy protects the homeland from invasion. It allows Britain to project force into Europe with raids and expeditionary forces. It cuts off enemy trade while protecting Britain's own. It isolates and seizes overseas colonies, including the vastly profitable sugar islands of the West Indies.
And it's just insane how much of a grasp they had on the world. You think of the Portuguese, you think of the Dutch as like predecessors to this. And then besides mercantile, you have the slave trade, you have the conquest, you have the island hopping. So like this this goes way beyond the Napoleonic Wars. This goes in terms of a global conquest. And just look at the map, guys. You guys understand from India to States to Australia to Canada to the islands, Caribbean to Africa. Like Great Britain just was everywhere. And it's because of these ships. It's because of these 110,000 men. It's because of their willingness to continuously build and protect and explore and conquest. So, yeah.
It undermines enemy economies, while allowing Britain to use its own financial strength to sustain its allies. In 2 decades of war with France, Britain wins a series of naval battles that ensure it can carry out these war-winning strategies effectively. Among the Royal Navy's most formidable warships, HMS Victory.
The big one.
A first-rate ship of the line, the most powerful class of warship afloat.
What makes it a first class versus a second class?
104 guns, 820 men.
Wow. Wow.
A single broadside from Victory packs more weight of iron than every gun in Wellington's army at Waterloo.
That's like... God, like, that's so formidable. Like, that's like an aircraft carrier or a battleship today. More like a battleship. Jesus Christ, bro.
This is Epic History TV's guide to a legendary Napoleonic warship.
Wow. HMS Victory.
Today, HMS Victory lies in dry dock in Portsmouth, on England's south coast, a famous visitor attraction and the world's oldest commissioned warship.
I gotta go see that. If it was in London, I probably would have saw it, but...
She's a remarkable survivor from a vanished world of sail-powered warships and global struggles between Europe's great empires. Victory was built to boost British naval power at the height of one of these struggles, the 7 Years' War. Construction began at Chatham Royal Dockyard in 1759. She was designed by Sir Thomas Slade, the foremost British naval architect of the age. Around 6,000 trees went into Victory.
Wow.
Most were British oak, though her lower masts were originally New England pine.
Overseas, from the Americas.
Her keel was elm, her upper masts and yards more flexible, fir and spruce. The result, launched in 1765, was soon considered a masterpiece. A ship bristling with firepower, with the speed and handling of a much lighter vessel. Victory was not completed in time to take part in the 7 Years' War. She first saw action 13 years later in the American War of Independence, leading the capture of a French convoy off Ushant. When the Revolutionary Wars broke out against France, HMS Victory was the British flagship at the Allied blockade of Toulon.
Really? So, like, they've already engaged with Napoleon somehow.
Then, in 1797, she was Admiral Jarvis's flagship at his great victory over the Spanish at Cape St. Vincent. Victory was by then 32 years old, far beyond her life expectancy of 18 years.
Really? So, like, the average ship only lasts like a couple decades, if that.
Worn out, she was briefly threatened with being turned into one of Britain's notorious prison ships, known as hulks. No one would have guessed that her greatest hour still lay ahead of her, because at the last minute, Victory was reprieved and began a major 3-year refit that cost more than she did to build. She returned to service in 1803 as Vice Admiral Nelson's flagship. 2 years later, she would lead the British attack at Trafalgar and win her place in naval legend.
Look how many windows that is, guys. That is 9 windows because there's frames in each. There's 9 windows per window. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 times 9 is a lot. Like there's like 200 to 300 plus windows on that backside, and the cannons. And I know this is like a 3D replica or a 3D representation, so it might not be 1-to-1. However, this is a big ship. Oh, we're about to go into detail. Okay.
By the Napoleonic Wars, a first-rate ship of the line was the world's largest and most sophisticated weapon of war, and it needed a huge crew to work efficiently. In 1805, Victory's complement was around 820, every man and boy with his designated role. From the admiral of the fleet to the ship's captain, naval lieutenants and marine officers, midshipmen, warrant officers, clerks and stewards, petty officers and their mates, sailors of the able, ordinary and landlubber variety, Royal Marines, right down to the 31 ship's boys.
Interesting.
Before we examine HMS Victory's arrangement and structure, a quick reminder of some common nautical terms.
Okay.
The right side of the ship. Starboard.
Right side is starboard. Starboard.
The left side of the ship. Larboard.
Larboard. Starboard. Okay.
Which only became
Left,
port
lar.
in 1844 to reduce confusion.
What
The
happened?
back became port. The left side of the ship. Larboard. which only became port in 1844 to reduce confusion.
Oh, port side.
The back of the ship,
Got it.
her stern. The front, her stem. Towards
Okay.
the stern was aft or abaft. Towards the stem was forward or fore.
I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to remember a lot of those.
Victory's middle gun deck was 186 feet long. The top of her main mast was 205 feet above the waterline. Victory's top speed was 10 knots, or 11.5 miles per hour.
Doesn't seem like that fast, but maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Fast for a ship her size.
Oh, okay.
In 1780, she received the latest British naval innovation, copper sheathing for her hull. This protected her timbers from shipworm, barnacles and weeds, keeping her
Shipworm?
solid and streamlined.
Like termites?
Victory, like all ships of the line, was ship-rigged, meaning she had 3 masts, a foremast, mainmast and mizzenmast, and a bowsprit.
Oh my gosh.
Each mast was made up of sections. The lower mast, secured deep in the ship's hold, rose up through the decks to the fighting top, which served as a platform for sharpshooters in battle. Above it, the topmast. Then the cross trees, which secured the top gallant mast, pronounced t'gallant. The cross trees was the lookout's position, there being no crow's nests in the Navy. Each mast supported several yards, to which the sails were fastened or bent. Victory's rig
The yards are just like the... I almost said string. What would you call that? Rope?
rigging, 26 miles of rope and 786 pulleys in all, came in 2 types. Standing rigging gave structural support to the masts. Forestays and backstays kept them braced fore and aft. The shrouds secured the masts laterally, and their rope steps, called ratlins, were how you climbed the masts. Experienced seamen reached the tops by climbing the futtock shrouds. On a rolling sea,
I can imagine, like, how many people... I can't imagine how many people fell from these things.
this could mean climbing out over the ocean upside down.
Yeah.
So novices were advised to use the lubber's hole.
I'm guessing that you were not... You were made fun of if you used the lubber's hole.
The other type of rigging was running rigging, used to operate the ship's yards and sails, and included halyards, bowlines, and clewlines. Victory had 37 sails with which to harness the power of the wind, her only real form of propulsion. They had a total area of 6,500 square yards, about the size of a football pitch, though not all sails could be set together, nor did more sail necessarily mean more speed. Her large square sails included the forecourse, fore topsail, pronounced topsail, and fore topgallant sail, pronounced
This is so complicated.
fore to'garnsail. On the mainmast, the main course, main topsail, and main to'garnsail.
That makes sense.
The mizzenmast carried a fore and aft rigged sail known as a spanker or driver, as well as mizzen topsail and mizzen to'garnsail, while the bowsprit could carry a variety of fore and aft rigged sails, most commonly a jib and flying jib.
A jib.
Another 11 fore and aft rigged sails, known as staysails, could also be set.
Okay.
Victory's upper deck, or weather deck, was actually several decks: the forecastle, waist, quarterdeck, and poop deck.
Okay. I think I've heard of a couple of...
The forecastle is a shortened form of forecastle, a term dating back to the Middle Ages when warships carried raised fighting platforms at both ends.
Oh.
The forecastle housed the belfry, containing the all-important ship's bell, rung regularly day and night to mark the change of watch.
Oh!
It also housed 2 12-pounder guns.
Hold on. Shot weight 12 pounds. So, oh, that's why it's called 12-pounder guns, because that's how much the cannonball weighs.
All guns in this period were described by the weight of shot they fired. So 12-pounders fired a solid iron ball known as round shot that weighed 12 pounds, about the same as a bowling ball.
Okay.
The forecastle also mounted two 68-pounder carronades.
How would you help? I guess you just gotta be strong.
The carronade was another British innovation, a short, large-caliber gun, fearsome at close quarters, but lacking a cannon's range or accuracy.
Makes sense.
The beak deck gave access to the bowsprit and the head, 6 outdoor toilets for several hundred seamen and marines,
Wow.
which emptied straight into the sea below.
Makes sense.
The waist is where 4 of Victory's 6 boats were stowed. All large ships carried several boats. They were essential for ferrying men and supplies from ship to ship and ship to shore, for towing or turning the ship in adverse winds, and for launching amphibious attacks.
Okay.
The quarterdeck was HMS Victory's command centre and housed a total of 12 12-pounder guns. From here, the ship was steered using the ship's wheel. This was the responsibility of one of the ship's 8 quartermasters, assisted by his mates. The ship's wheel was connected by rope to the tiller 3 decks below, which was in turn connected to the rudder.
Okay, so the wheel is connected to the tiller, which is connected to the rudder. Okay.
The binnacle, just 4 of the wheel, contained the ship's magnetic compasses
Oh,
and
that's
a
cool.
lantern by which to see them.
That's cool.
Cabins for the captain's secretary and the ship's master were located either side of the ship's wheel. Each shared their small room with a 12-pounder gun.
Of course, you never know.
The stern area of the quarterdeck comprised the captain's cabins, a dining room, sleeping cabin, and at the very stern of the ship, his day cabin, all sharing space with 4 12-pounders. The captain also had a private toilet, known as the quarter gallery.
Best place in the entire ship, probably, or the bathroom.
Above the captain's cabins, the poop deck, which provided good visibility and access to the mizzenmast. It also housed the signal locker, containing the coloured flags used to communicate with other ships and shore. The Royal Navy's signals code had been recently revised by Admiral Howe. His system involved 14 flags, which could be arranged in various combinations to convey 340 messages.
What? Okay. Okay.
For emphasis, a gun might be fired. At night, signalling was by pre-agreed combinations of gunfire, coloured lanterns, and rockets.
Fireworks?
A Napoleonic
Interesting.
ship of the line was, in essence, a giant floating gun battery, designed to pulverize enemy warships and shore installations.
I mean, if this thing starts firing upon you and it's hitting, you're done. Like, you're done. I mean, that's just a wall of battery.
Victory's 3 largest decks were all about her
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories.
guns, as indicated by their name, the upper, middle, and lower gun deck. The upper gun deck housed 30 12-pounder guns, 15 on each side. Forward in the round houses was the head for junior officers, rank bringing slightly more privacy and comfort. The sick bay was located in the forward area of the upper gun deck, as it got more fresh air and sunlight than the lower decks. It was screened off from the rest of the deck by canvas partitions. The surgeon's assistants, nicknamed Loblolly Boys for the soup they fed to patients, also slept here in their hammocks.
I can imagine this is just... It would just be hell in this area right here. All the time. Sickness, just malnutrition, injury, blood, death. Oh,
HMS Victory was a first-rate ship of the line, defined as one that carried 100 guns or more.
That was the question. That was just answered. So you have to have 100 guns or more. So it's based off of capacity of guns. Got it.
They were the most powerful vessels afloat, and so admirals often chose them as their flagships, the command vessels for a fleet or squadron. Several renowned British admirals took Victory as their flagship at various times, including Earl Howe and Earl St. Vincent. The most famous, of course, was Viscount Nelson.
The Horatio?
An admiral required his own suitably grand quarters, located in the stern section of the upper gun deck.
Wow.
These comprised an anteroom and a dining room, which also served as a meeting room. In the sleeping cabin, the admiral usually slept in a suspended cot, but Nelson preferred a campaign bed like this one, easier to get in and out of with only one arm.
One arm? He only had one arm? So yeah, that's how much I don't know.
At the very stern lay the admiral's day cabin, which served as his office and private space. The admiral would spend much of his day here, submerged in the meetings, paperwork and administration required in the running of a fleet. The admiral's cabins, like all cabins on the gun decks and quarterdeck, were formed by removable wooden panels. This meant when a ship cleared for action before battle, the cabins could be rapidly dismantled and carried with furniture and personal items down into the hold.
Okay.
The purpose of this was to allow the gun crews to work their guns without obstruction.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is super cool, and we're not just going to ease over that. That is just like forward thinking. I mean, we are in the 18th century, 19th century at this point, early 19th century. But maybe, you know, this was created in the 1760s, 1750s. So just amazing engineering right there.
The middle gun deck housed 28 24-pounder guns. Heavier guns were lower in the ship for greater stability.
Makes sense.
The ship's galley, a kitchen and giant iron stove, was where the ship's cook and his mates prepared meals for the crew.
I bet they were going all the time.
The stern section was known as the wardroom, where commissioned officers dined and slept.
Okay.
At night, around 300 sailors and marines slept on this deck.
Suspended hammocks?
Their hammocks strung up between the guns.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Bunk beds would have been worse, right?
The deck below was the lower gun deck. This housed the Victory's heaviest guns, her 30 32-pounders. And at night, more than half the crew, around 460 men, slept here. This plan of HMS Bedford, a contemporary third-rate ship of the line, shows how crowded it could be below decks.
So each one of these blue things is a single hammock? I mean, it's not that much different than barracks, you know. A little closer, I guess.
This far down in the ship, gun ports were usually kept shut because they were close to the waterline.
Don't want that.
With little fresh air and so many men living down here, the smells of the lower gun deck could be notoriously challenging.
Oh, yeah.
The stern area, separated by canvas screens, was known as the gun room. This was where warrant officers dined, with screened-off sleeping quarters for the master gunner, chaplain, and 2 junior lieutenants.
I wonder how disciplined the crew was. Was there like infighting and like, I mean, especially when you have like 800 men in one closed building on the sea, you're gonna have some arguments. I wonder how that was dealt.
They shared the gun room with the ship's tiller, a large wooden beam connecting the ship's rudder to the ship's wheel via a series of ropes and pulleys.
Yeah, really cool.
The tiller is not currently in situ, but the strip of canvas marks its position.
Oh,
the beam would swing through the room when the ship turned, so anyone dining in the gun room was wise to mind their head. Below the lower gun deck was the orlop deck, a warren of small cabins and stores beneath the waterline, lit only by lanterns. The forward section contained storerooms and cabins for the bosun and carpenter. The more open area by the main mast was known as the cockpit, fore and aft. The midshipmen berthed and messed here, but in battle it became the surgeon's operating theatre.
So, like, what do you call it? Trauma? This is like the trauma room?
At the Battle of Trafalgar, after Vice Admiral Nelson was shot on the quarterdeck by a French sharpshooter, he was carried down to the orlop. Victory's surgeon was unable to save him, and this is where he died.
I didn't even know that! See, I'm so ignorant.
Off the aft cockpit lay a series of cramped compartments, including personal storerooms for the captain and first lieutenant, the steward's room for issuing rations brought up from the hold, the surgeon's cabin and his dispensary, and various other cabins and storerooms. Forward and aft, hanging magazines held ready-made cartridges for the guns, sent up from the main magazine. The orlop deck was surrounded by a passage known as the Carpenter's Walk, which gave the carpenter and his mates easy access to the ship's hull to plug any leaks. At the very bottom of the ship lay the hold, around 50,000 cubic feet, holding provisions for up to 6 months at sea.
So that's what I was about to ask that question. How long is a typical at sea for a restock? I mean, it's different, like if you're going to the Caribbean and then you restock there, but like how long would this actually be at sea? So 6 months worth of provisions, okay.
It was lined with 257 tons of iron ballast to keep the ship stable.
Oh.
This was covered by 200 tons of shingle, additional ballast, which provided a stable bed for the ship's 150-gallon water casks. These alone weighed roughly 300 tons at the start of a voyage. Other barrels contained 50 tons of salt beef, 50 tons of salt pork, and 45 tons of ship's biscuit. Various storerooms below contained items such as flour, spirits, tar, and paint.
Okay.
The shot locker contained 100 tons of iron shot. Last but not least, the most vulnerable part of the ship,
I was about to say, is this the gunpowder room?
the Grand Magazine, holding up to 35 tons of gunpowder in 784 barrels.
And you need to have this below the sea so it's not easily being able to be shot.
A fire here would cause an explosion that obliterated the ship and anyone aboard. Or if water got in, the gunpowder would be useless in battle. Therefore, elaborate precautions were taken to keep the magazine safe, including fire doors, fire-retardant plaster walls, copper sheathing to avoid sparks and keep out moisture and rats. The forward section of the magazine was the filling room. Here, loose gunpowder was scooped from this powder bin into cloth bags to make cartridges for the guns. Lanterns were kept safely behind glass in an adjacent light room.
That makes sense. Wow, very smart.
Until required, ready cartridges were stored in racks on either side of the filling room. In an age before steam or electrical power, all the ship's heavy lifting had to be done by manpower. Mechanical assistance came from 2 capstans, the main capstan and jeer capstan. These were effectively giant winches, which extended vertically through the middle and lower gun decks. To turn them, bars were inserted into the capstan head, with up to 10 men pushing each bar.
That is like, we've seen this all the way from like the Greeks.
Using both decks, this meant 260 men were working the capstan for the heaviest jobs, such as raising the main anchor or hoisting a gun. The work was often accompanied by a fiddler, a shanty, and the stamp of feet. Victory carried 7 anchors in total. The heaviest, the best bower anchor, weighed 4 tons and was rigged at the starboard bow.
That's 8,000 pounds. What is it made out of? that just iron or?
The small bower anchor on the larboard side was only slightly smaller. Sheet, kedge and stream anchors served as spares, and for keeping the ship stationary in small harbours or rough weather. All wooden ships leak at sea, even before hulls are split by cannonballs or hidden reefs. Victory had 4 crank-operated chain pumps, which could pump water out of the ship at approximately 1,300 gallons per minute.
That is pretty cool. What is the offset though? How much, depending on the damage, how much water on like if a 12-pound went through the hull, water starts coming in. Within that 12-pound, or we can say a 60-pound, whatever, how much water comes in per minute versus how many comes out? What's the delta there? That's an interesting thought.
About 300 jerry cans worth. She also had 2 elm pumps for pumping seawater into the ship for washing and putting out fires.
Oh, okay, smart. Like a fire.
In the late 18th century, HMS Victory and ships like her were the most sophisticated and advanced machines in the world. Massive floating batteries that could remain at sea for 6 months or more and traverse the globe. In the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars, they battled for naval supremacy, most dramatically in giant fleet actions. It was a contest that Britain won decisively. The consequences for Napoleon were disastrous. But for all Victory's qualities, it was not ship design that gave Britain the edge in the war at sea. It was the men who sailed her. British commanders and crews were experienced, capable and aggressive. In the next video, we'll see how they sailed and fought a ship like Victory, and how they lived aboard her.
That's cool. That's cool. This is really fun. I like this just because we're kind of getting a little bit of the understanding here versus, just going with the wind. And it gives us a little context to kind of like the day of the life of a sailor, or a day of life of an admiral. And yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. Also, real quick, obvious statement. If you've ever been to London, there's something called Trafalgar Square. That is, of course, what this is named after. But I'm excited to learn more. Guys, this is just part 1 of 2. We're going to watch part 2, and then we'll be back in the Napoleon series, just like that. So I appreciate you. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Peace out. Bye-bye.